Alex Samel, who is the chief party at Venture 37, and who will highlight the role and contribution of the US Department of Agriculture in supporting the harmonization of food laws in the region with international standards. And he will share more details about the best practice that a project in Egypt that is funded by the USDA and that focuses on transforming the assessment and inspection of food businesses in Egypt in view of expanding domestic and international trade of Egyptian food products. And this is achieved through capacity buildings provided to the Egypt National Food Safety Agency and in supporting the inspection systems. So Dr. Samel, the floor is yours.
Great. Thank you very much, Rola, and thank you to G-Force for the invitation to speak today. Good morning to everyone, good afternoon, good evening. My name is Alex Samel, and I do serve as the Chief of Party for the TAIB project supported by the United States Department of Agriculture. It's a privilege to be here with you today to share some exciting developments and insights into the enhancement of Egypt's food regulatory system. I'll start today by providing a brief overview of USDA Food for Progress and the TAIB project. I will then speak to some of the existing regulatory challenges that hinder trade in Egypt and are applicable to many countries throughout the region. Next, I will speak to our support to Egypt's competent authority, the National Food Safety Authority, or NAFSA for short. I will conclude with a discussion of some of Egypt's recent regulatory enhancements to promote trade and harmonize their food regulatory requirements with international standards. While many in attendance may be familiar with USAID and their programming, the work of the United States Department of Agriculture's Food for Progress may be new to a few. Like USAID, USDA's Food for Progress implements programs around the world with a focus on supporting countries to modernize and strengthen their agricultural sectors. Programming supported by Food for Progress aims to achieve improvement in agricultural productivity and/or the expansion in the trade of agricultural products. Briefly about TAIB. TAIB is envisioned to be a 5-year development initiative funded by USDA's Food for Progress. TAIB started at the beginning of 2019 and represents a transition for Food for Progress towards supporting food safety and trade facilitation. TAIB's goal is to increase agricultural trade through supporting the development of Egypt's National Food Safety Authority. We implement 3 interconnected components that include organizational development, workforce training, and improving Egypt's food policy and regulatory framework, the last of which is most relevant to our today's discussion. TAIB is implemented by Land O'Lakes Venture 37, a not-for-profit that is affiliated with Land O'Lakes Inc., a Fortune 200 farmer-owned cooperative. And with support from USDA, Venture 37 implements SBS and trade facilitation programming in Egypt, throughout the East African community, and now in Bangladesh. I'll now speak to some of the existing regulatory challenges that have emerged and that were in place when we started our programming. Despite preferential market access agreements, such as the PAFTA that Dr. Godfrey spoke about, the region has some of the lowest inter-regional trade in the world. A few of these regulatory challenges we have seen in Egypt and that are applicable to other countries include the legacy of a multi-agency approach. So prior to the establishment of NAFSA in 2017, Egypt had 17 ministries and agencies responsible for the oversight of food safety. This system created duplications in enforcement and regulation setting while hindering transparency and stakeholder engagement. While the creation of NAFSA establishes a single regulator of food, the food control system remains in transition as the scale out of NAFSA occurs. Outdated and complex technical regulations not based on science. So Egypt's regulatory framework remains inconsistent with international standards and codex guidance. In some cases, regulations on the books date back more than 1 century. In other cases, regulations development is not consistent with science and applying an appropriate level of protection. Regulations are often developed with minimal transparency, and WO notifications are late or do not occur. A reliance on at-border compliance verification. So Egypt was applying a 100% consignment sampling and inspection regime for imported food. This increases the costs associated with trade and delays consignment release. And with a multi-agency system, multiple authorities are responsible for approving consignment release. And then trade barriers, such as non-consistent labeling requirements, standards enforcement, and mandatory pre-shipment inspections were increasing the cost of trade. I'll now turn to speak to some of the support that we've been providing NAFSA as they're enhancing Egypt's food regulatory system. So firstly, one of the activities that we work on is regulations benchmarking. One constraint that we found is that countries have had difficulty benchmarking their current regulations against international standards and trading partners. We've been providing support to Egypt to benchmark existing regulatory standards against codex, regional, and international trading partners. We're also working to provide international guidance and reference documentation. To support harmonization efforts, we're developing international guidance documentation that showcases best practices from international countries on their regulatory control approach, as well as guidance from codex. We then work with NAFSA to develop their policy frameworks and to articulate their positions to stakeholders. We're also working with NAFSA to obtain data through consumption studies and other sources. And utilizing this data, we're working with NAFSA to conduct risk analysis to set an appropriate level of protection. We work to ensure that regulations that are being developed are not just copy pasted from one country's jurisdiction, but really are based on science. And we're also bringing together public and private dialogue. We're bringing together stakeholders to review and discuss technical regulations prior to their publication. And we're working with NAFSA to develop industry guidance to enhance compliance and understanding and promote delayed enforcement to allow industry time to adjust to new regulatory requirements. I'll now briefly update on some of the recent regulatory enhancements taken up by the National Food Safety Authority. So here are some of the horizontal regulations that NAFSA has recently published and represent enhancements to the food control system. All are based on codex guidance and our MRL set with support of a risk assessment. I will speak mostly about the risk-based food import control system. This new approach calls for the transition away from 100% consignment sampling and inspection to a risk-based approach. Under this new system, consignment sampling and inspection rates will be determined by 4 factors: country of origin, inherent risk of the food, importer's compliance history, and pre-shipment compliance verification by a registered conformity assessment body or foreign competent authority. Rather than be subject to 100% sampling and inspection, under the new food import control system, consignments will be subject to a range of sampling and inspection rates extending to as low as 2% for the lowest risk consignments. This import strategy is published. It's made available on NAFSA's website, as well as the executive director of the National Food Safety Authority presented on the new import control system at Gulf Food earlier this week. We're pleased to be working with NAFSA as they continue to work tirelessly to improve food safety and facilitate trade. And looking to the future, here are some areas that we've highlighted for regulatory enhancement. So microbiological contaminants, pesticides regulation, chemical contaminants, food contact materials, and food export control. So these are some areas that we'll be looking to work with and partner with NAFSA as we move into the future. And with that, just here's a brief overview of the work that TAIB has been doing. Please feel free to reach out to me if you should have any questions. My email address is here on this slide. And thank you again for your attention, and thank you for the opportunity to share some of our work today with all of you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Samel, for this update.